In 1921, the US Congress held meetings about the possible introduction of tariffs. One of the items that was being discussed were peanuts. Why? Because there was a flood of peanuts from China entering the US, and peanut producers in the South were very concerned about this. So at this congressional hearing, an expert was invited to testify on behalf of peanut growers. And that expert was George Washington Carver. Well, George Washington Carver was very interesting in terms of a person who was asked to testify in front of Congress in 1921 because he was black. And this raised really a lot of consternation at that time in the US, which was deeply segregated. But nevertheless, Carver did testify because he already had established a name for himself as being a professor at the Tuskegee Institute. And he had graduated from the University of Iowa. He was an expert on agriculture. And at that time, cotton was the main crop in the US South, but cotton robbed the soil of nutrients. So after a while, the crop wasn't produced properly. And Carver introduced the idea of crop rotation. He said that if you grow a legume with cotton year by year, that is cotton one year and then legumes another year, etc., this crop rotation, the legumes would feed nutrients, nitrogen, into the soil. And this changed the progress of agriculture in the South. Of course, peanuts were a great legume, easy to grow. But now there was an abundance of peanuts initially, and he, in the lab, experimented with all kinds of possibilities to grow peanuts efficiently and also to make different kind of products out of peanuts. And he made a whole bunch of these, including a massage oil. And this was apparently even used by President Roosevelt, who suffered from polio. And he said that he was helped by massaging himself with this oil. Carver was also great friends with Henry Ford. Both of them were interested in using plant products for benefits other than just eating. And he had a long relationship with Ford. In fact, when Carver eventually became somewhat debilitated and couldn't move properly, Ford had an elevator installed in his laboratory. So there's no question that George Washington Carver deserved the name of the Peanut Man. However, one thing that he did not invent, contrary to many stories, is peanut butter. Oh, who actually did invent peanut butter? Therein lies a long and convoluted story. There's a possible connection to Montreal here because a gentleman by the name of Edward Gibson supposedly invented peanut butter here. That actually didn't happen. He did patent a cotton or a candy that was made with peanuts, and he ground the peanuts. So he did produce a paste, but this really was for a candy, not for peanut butter. Uh, St. Louis probably was the birthplace of peanut butter because it was there that a physician had decided that his patients who were missing teeth, couldn't chew food, could benefit from ground up peanuts. And he did ground up some of these peanuts. And he had a friend, George Bailey, and who already had a company manufacturing foods, and he started to produce peanut butter, which actually was sold in 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair. John Harvey Kellogg was another candidate for the invention of peanut butter. He received a patent for it. What he really had in mind was a substitute for meat at his sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan. He was a dedicated vegetarian because he thought that meat eating was unhealthy. He thought it inflamed the passions and led to sexual activity, which he thought robbed the body of energy. But the main problem with peanut butter back then was that the peanut oil separated from the solids. And this problem was eventually solved. And it was solved by an entrepreneur, Rosenfeld, who found a way to hydrogenate the peanut oil to make it into a solid so that it would not separate. This is a process that actually was invented long before in 1902 by a German chemist by the name of Wilhelm Norman, who had received a patent for this. And it was a rather novel idea where hydrogen gas using a nickel catalyst was passed over an oil, a liquid oil, and that absorbed hydrogen. It became saturated with hydrogen and it became a solid fat. And this was, of course, beneficial for sales of peanut butter because it no longer separated. However, at that time, it wasn't known that this hydrogenation process, which converts the double bonds in a fatty acid into single bonds, had a side effect, and that was the production of the so-called trans fatty acids. And trans fatty acids have become notorious because they can clog up arteries and result in heart disease. So they are no longer used. So this process of partial hydrogenation has been eliminated. So now when you look on a label of a peanut butter, you won't see partial hydrogenation. What you will see is the addition of some solid fats made by full hydrogenation. And that eliminates the possibility of trans fats. But fully saturated fats also can increase the risk of heart disease. However, not in the amounts of peanut butter that is usually consumed, that is 2 tablespoons. It is possible to buy peanut butter today that is, quote, natural, that doesn't have any additives, doesn't have, not hydrogenated, doesn't have any palm oil added to it. So it will separate. So you are urged to store it upside down, stir it well and store it upside down. But the main problem with peanuts people hear of is allergy. That can be very, very severe. People of peanut allergy should always have an EpiPen within reach. And there has been some controversy about when to introduce peanuts to children. And today, the guidelines are pretty straightforward. If a child has eczema or an egg allergy, then you have to be very careful. And perhaps the first exposure to peanuts should be done in conjunction with a doctor because they may want to do testing before. But if there is no severe case of egg allergy or eczema, then it is best to introduce peanuts at around 4 to 6 months of age. And that will reduce the risk of peanut allergy in the future. If there's no egg allergy and there's no eczema, then peanuts can be introduced along with other foods without a care around 6 months of age. So there's the interesting story of peanuts. I'll tell you the truth. I've never been a big fan of peanut butter. I grew up in Hungary, and peanut butter was unknown. And so when I came to Canada, this was totally a foreign substance, and it didn't really match the requirements of my palate. Although I will very happily shell peanuts and eat those. I like that, especially if you put a good baseball game in front of it.